Today is November 12th, 2023, and it is the 20th episode of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Joe, different day today. We've got some Big Ten action basketball-wise on a Monday, so we're going to recap Week 11 today, go over the big scandals going around not just college football, but all of sports, and then we'll talk about some of the action that happened over the weekend in basketball, and then what lies ahead. So, Joe, we're going to start with the elephant in the room, as you say. Jim Harbaugh has been suspended 3 games by the Big Ten in an unprecedented move for a conference to do this after the NCAA almost clears him, it seemed like, from their wording. He was not on the sideline for their win, but before we talk about their win over Penn State, just add anything to the situation that I missed.
No, I think you covered it pretty clearly, the big parts of it. The biggest thing I would say is on Friday, so we'll touch on this a little on our next show, there will be a hearing in the Eastern District Court of Michigan, and the judge ruling on the case went to Michigan. So I already hear the viewers freaking out, being like, oh, like, of course, that's not, like, fair and all. But, Sean mentioned this was unprecedented. It really is unprecedented because they had 13 athletic directors and presidents on a call, with the exclusion of one being Michigan, to pressure Petiti, the new Big Ten commissioner, into making this decision. And, this is speaking purely as a Michigan fan. It was hard to get more unpopular than Kevin Warren, but this guy's already done so. So I got to tip my cap to him for that. On a second note, though, it was pretty ridiculous what they did. They claimed they waited till Friday because Michigan gave them a 10-page statement. Sean and I in high school analyzed text packets that were 10 pages. A high schooler who, with basic deduction skills, could figure out a 10-page document. It did not take the Big Ten 48 hours to read a 10-page document. They purely did it because Friday was a federal holiday, so they thought Michigan couldn't get a favorable judge. And the Big Ten did succeed in doing that, so a strategic move on their part, certainly a very dirty one and a very unprecedented one. But taking feelings out of it, the game on Saturday, Michigan really didn't suffer from that because Jim was there the whole week to game plan, and they were definitely prepared for Sharon to take over. And clearly that's what you saw. Going into the game itself, Sean, I mean, what were your thoughts before you get into mine?
I thought I don't know if I would go as far as to say it was dominating for Michigan, but really after a couple drives you could tell that the class level was different between the two teams. Like, Penn State is a very solid team and probably right around where they deserve in the rankings, but they are not as good as Michigan, and that was pretty clear. Michigan's only threw the ball 8 times, 0 times in the second half. That was pretty interesting, and the score ended up being 24-15, but Penn State did score with a TD with a couple minutes left to make it 9 points. But Blake Corum is really good. I feel like Michigan haven't really let him cook yet this year, but give him 26 carries for 145 and 2 touchdowns. The defense, as I've been saying, is as elite as any. And I'm not saying that it was really surprising, but Michigan's playing with a chip on their shoulder. Whether it's true or not, they're going with the Michigan everybody against us model, and it seemed to work this week. I would think that Harbaugh will probably be, I would think he would be back on the sideline for next week, and then maybe the TRO or whatever expires, and then he'd be out for the Ohio State game. But I don't think it really made that big of a difference. The associate head coach was the acting head coach for the first 3 games of the year, right? And
No, only one, because he was suspended for the first game. So
they rotated
Sean,
it. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To take over though, Sean, I on the TRO thing, it would actually have a two week over period too while they're rolling it. So he would be on the sideline for Ohio State. But to add on to what Sean said, this is from a source we have on the team. The game plan was, whenever Penn State's won games like these, they've done very well in pressuring the quarterback, and they've capitalized off other teams giving them a shorter field. And, offensively, Penn State really struggled in this game. So Michigan figured, why throw the ball and why even give them the chance? It's not that they don't trust JJ. Why even give them the chance to have a shorter field? The offense, after Drew Aller fumbled, he didn't run at all. They had a lot of success with him carrying the ball. After that, though, their offense was really one-dimensional. They could only run. Nick Singleton would get 5 yards on first down. Just repeated itself. They get stuffed on second down. Then on 3rd and 5, they look for a dump down to Tyler Warren. And if it wasn't there, they look at Theo Johnson. If it wasn't there, Aller was throwing it away. So, really good game plan for Michigan. They allowed Penn State to kind of make mistakes, which they did both offensively and coaching-wise. I think it was kind of a joke that Penn State fired Mike Yurcich today when it was really the head coach's decisions, specifically going for it on those 2-point conversions and that 4th down late in the game that cost them, showing that James Franklin never learned his lesson from the Ohio State game. But, we could get into criticism of him in a future episode. But point is, Michigan's really good. Didn't even have to show too much of the playbook. JJ did run, which opened up some dimensions of the run game, but certainly even more stored for Ohio State in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it in the offseason, but I think Michigan, there's a real chance that they're going to seriously consider leaving the conference after something like this. And, from their point of view, I don't think you can really blame them. But that's a topic that we go into in another time. Joe, we're going to flip this to Penn State's point of view just for a second. It seemed like this was their year. You have both the 2 big teams ahead of you at home, and you're going to end up with 2 losses again. It just seems like this is kind of the ceiling for Penn State, and they're not really going to be able to get over the line. Drew Aller was okay. Like you said, he didn't do much. He didn't stink, but he was just not that good, and they come up short again.
Yeah, Sean, I think this is, again, the same story. There is I hate referring to memes, but it's really true over the past, there's been like 4 or 5 really good seasons under Franklin. All of them have entailed 2 losses, winning a New Year's Six bowl game, not all New Year's Six bowl games, but they've all entailed losing to one of, and usually both of Michigan and Ohio State. That's who runs the conference. That's who's won 6 of the last 6 Big Ten titles. So, those are the guys you have to beat, whether that's fair or not. That's the expectation there. He is a very good coach. I'll make that very clear. Anyone going to New Year's Six bowl games pretty much every other year and winning them, that's something most programs would kill for. But the expectation there is even higher than that. They felt they've been stagnant since 2016. I do think they're an offensive coordinator away, and I've said this for years, that they are an offensive coordinator away, kind of like Lincoln Riley's a defensive coordinator away from being really elite, and they just haven't done so yet. Drew Aller really hasn't developed much this year. I don't think it's a reflection on him. It's more a reflection of the coaches. So I don't see them losing any of their next 2 games, home to Rutgers and away at Ford Field to Michigan State, but certainly just more of the same for Penn State. So we'll analyze them in the offseason, and let's get to some more games, Sean.
Yeah, so the Big Ten West, as Joe and I have said over the years, is going to be close down to the stretch. Well, it might not be. Iowa was winning by 1 game over basically everybody else in the division. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska, the 3 main challengers, all lost. Iowa beat Rutgers 22-0, an impressive, or I guess as impressive as you can get offensively for Iowa. Iowa's got their one hand on the trophy. It all but seals it. One thing has to go their way over the next 2 weeks, whether that's they win once or these other teams lose once. They will be Big Ten West champions and will face Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Joe, Iowa, I don't know if they really answered the bell, but they let Deacon Hill go for it a little bit, and they end up winning the game by a lot.
Yeah, the under in this game did hit. Iowa did win 22-0, but Sean, this is across the Big Ten West. This is something I'll just get ahead of, so we don't have to talk about it too much. With the exception of Iowa, who's 8-2, and Purdue, who's 3-7, everyone else is 5-5 in that division. People who are all about, I think, equal, parity and all that. That there's parity for you. I don't think it's the good kind. It's certainly not the eat and eat Nick Saban reference to the NFL that would help ratings, because ratings for those games are even lower than they were last year. But overall, let's just recap the West in one, Sean. A really bad week for the contenders. Wisconsin got dominated by Northwestern at home. were losing that game for most of it by 14 or 21
Early
points.
on too.
And again, yeah, shout out to David Braun, seriously. And
They
they had Tanner Mordecai back too.
they might sneak their way into a bowl game here, which would be one of the more incredible achievements that we've seen. But yeah,
Yeah, and Sean, he should be coach of the year. I don't care if it's I don't like Michigan Ohio State going undefeated. That's nothing you would have said to anyone at the beginning of the year. No one would be shocked by that. But Northwestern making a bowl game or even contending for one, that's something that would raise a lot of eyebrows. So if I were to have a coach of the year right now, it would be David Braun. But getting off that game and going into the rest of them, Purdue dominating Minnesota, already not eligible for a bowl game, just really kicking their butt on offense. Minnesota's defense had no answer. Really looked at Purdue of last year. It's the way they just moved the ball with ease. And we already talked about Iowa, Minnesota, and then Illinois, Indiana. That was probably the weirdest game. I did not expect a combined 93 points. So really good job by Illinois. Also might sneak into a bowl game. They were all but dead for one about 3 weeks ago. So really good on them. And then I think the one team we're missing is Nebraska, Maryland. That's probably one of the worst football games I've ever had to watch highlights of. Um, 5 turnovers for Nebraska by 3 different quarterbacks. You had fumbles, you had interceptions at the goal line. For Nebraska, it kind of felt like what they did against Minnesota the first game of the year, and seeing that regression is not great. Their defense played phenomenal, just not enough. And Maryland kicking off the walk-off field goal. Nebraska in a matter of 2 weeks went from won 3 games in a row, were like 5-3, really could have competed or won the West, and lost to 2 teams that one definitely not going to a bowl now, one that now is going to a bowl that probably shouldn't have based on their 4 straight losses, Maryland. So really bad for Nebraska. They go to Madison and then they host Iowa. I think both of those are winnable games, but they've left 3 games on the board that Nebraska, I'll put it this way, could easily be 8-2 right now. Minnesota, Michigan State, and Maryland, all 3 of those games they should have won, frankly.
so the only other game, Joe, is Ohio State and Michigan State. The Buckeyes, like we asked them to, they put them away early. They win this 38-3, and after the first couple drives, it was pretty clear that it was going to be a lopsided affair. Marvin Harrison Jr. Improved his draft stock as much as he has already, 7 for 149 and 2 touchdowns. And then Ohio State will host Minnesota next week before they go to the Big House in Michigan. So, Joe, this is not surprising really by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess we can move it to this. I think there's a real chance now that 2 Big Ten teams will be in the college football playoff.
I wouldn't go that far. Maybe we'll save this for our next show. I think someone already asked a question about it too, which we're going to save our question for the second show of the week now, guys. So we'll dedicate a lot more time to that because it's not fair to rush through them. But getting off that, Ohio State, I think you recapped the game. No one expected that game to be close. Ohio State did cover. So for all the gamblers out there, they were happy. Kyle McCord looked a lot more comfortable. And I'm going to be fair to him. He did play really well. I think he's gotten a lot of unfair criticism following C.J. Stroud, who's probably going to win Rookie of the Year as of right now in the NFL. I think he's done a really solid job, and he doesn't lose them games. If you're Ohio State, I don't understand like this. Besides against Michigan, you don't really need to do too much to win the Big Ten. That's no secret. Now, people are going to freak out by me saying this, but he doesn't have to be that good. And he's been good. That's not saying he hasn't been good. He doesn't have to be good. So really good for them. Defense was dominant. And they just did what an elite team does. They got rid of a really bad team at home. Really helped Marvin Harrison Jr.'s Heisman campaign. J.J. McCarthy only went 7 for 8 with 60 yards. He's probably the only other Heisman contender in this conference. So good on Ohio State. Next week for Michigan and Ohio State is simply going to be about getting no one injured, putting nothing on film. And yeah, Sean, that's probably does it for our football recap. Anything else to add?
Yeah, we'll get to the games next week in the middle of the week episode. We're thinking Wednesday for now, but that's definitely subject to change. There aren't a ton of great games next week, so we'll probably roll through those really quickly, and then we'll get to basketball in the end. But definitely definitely give at least 5 minutes to questions. We're going to change gears here to basketball. Joe, we've got a couple of topics to hit here as we hit the 15-minute mark. We're going to start with Michigan State. Now, we talked about them losing to James Madison last time. They do beat Southern Indiana by 23, but their offense does not look good at all. Their defense, they came ready to play defensively, and that's why they won this game by a lot. But just 1 3 made, again, 1 of 11. Their defense is good, but their offense is really, really broken right now. And they've got Duke on Tuesday. I think it's just as simple as you've got veterans who need to play better, who have played better before. They just, for some reason, aren't at the level that a lot of people thought they would be.
Yeah, Sean, obviously good on them for getting a win, but that's did not answer a lot of Michigan State fans' questions. And I'm just going to mention this. I guess, casually mentioned how Joey Hauser was the only real contributor last year that was missing. I think you're starting to see stronger side effects to that than we ever
And
thought.
he was their best shooter. Maybe not percentage-wise, but big-time shot-wise, definitely.
And you had to respect him. Like, you have to – the moment – it'd be funny. The moment he got the ball, you'd have a defender running towards him like he was worth like $30 million to even like – that's why he got fouled so much too. With that said, that spaced the floor for them really well. Kind of made getting to the basket easier for Hogard, Akins, and Tyson Walker. But, I think Tuesday's going to answer a lot of questions for them. That's probably their first true litmus test. I understand losing to James Madison. I think that's kind of like failing an introductory quiz. It's something that is really not good, but there's no need to panic per se. Their first semi-exam is against Duke, just to see where they're at. By no means, if they get crushed by 30, does it matter. But in terms of a team that has national championship Final Four expectations, I'm going to need to see them space the floor better. I'm going to need to see H.A. Hogard and Akins attacking the basket more. And I do think Cohen Carr is really good. I'm going to need to see them kind of take more pressure off him. I think he's better when he's looser and pressure's kind of off him. So that could really help these freshmen out once the veterans start stepping up.
Yeah, Duke did lose to Arizona at home on Friday. That's the John Shire's first loss at home as Duke coach. And Duke did not look great. So I think there's a chance that Michigan State could win this. Duke cannot rebound the ball at all, really. And that's something that Tom Izzo's teams do fairly well. So both teams are not coming into that 2 versus 4 ranked team, as obviously now that will change since both of them lost since the last ranking. But both those teams will be really good by the end of the year, so it's a really good chance to get a quality win. And both teams kind of need it right now because neither team wants to go 1-2. Now, we've got Michigan here up next. Joe, your Wolverines can score the ball all of a sudden. Totally not what we saw coming. They beat Youngstown State 92-62. And anything else to note from this one other than Doug McDaniel and Kamala look like they could be a really good 1-2 punch?
I think that says it all. I do think Doug is a lot more experienced. I think he grew up a lot last year. He definitely had plenty of bumps and bruises along the way, but he looks more comfortable, and he looks really good as an off-ball guard. They did bring Namari Burnett in. Not that Namari ever runs point, but it takes a lot of ball handling pressure off Doug. And frankly, defensively, having a guy like Namari Burnett is really helpful. If he starts making threes consistently, I think that changes the whole dynamic of this offense too. And I got to mention Terrence Williams. We've criticized him a lot on this show. He's really shown out. Yeah, making these threes. Spent a lot of the offseason playing around the jump shot, changed the form. Used to be one of these like slow developing ones. Now it's just quick release, and it looks really good. We've touched on them a lot about their offseason improvements. This is their first, like Michigan State, first litmus test at St. John's, Rick Pitino's debut at the Garden. This is why you watch college ball for games like this, especially early in the year. Very low stakes in terms of whoever loses. By no means that a bad loss. And, kind of two similar teams, a lot of transfers on both teams. They do have like core guys, like I'd say Doug and Terrace are core guys, and Joel Soriano for St. John's is their core guy. He's played really well the first game. So definitely going to be a test for both teams. Martelli versus Rick Pitino. That's a game. If you went to Catholic school in the Northeast, you're going to love that coaching matchup. So Sean, anything else to add?
I would just say, St. John's has a ton of depth. They have a ton of good players. So, I mean, they've only played one game so far. Interesting scheduling from Rick. I feel like Patino does like to, for some reason, every year at Iona, there are always a couple of games short on their non-conference. He definitely likes to keep them sharp early in the year. So this is only their second game. I do think they're not great defensively, so I do think Michigan could score a little bit on them, but I think it should be a really good game because, you know, as much as Phil Martelli has been there for a couple of years, it really does seem like a new Michigan team, and then obviously Rick Pitino has assembled those transfers from all over the country, so it seems like two really new teams. So it's really going to come down to who's more ready to play somebody at their level because Michigan took care of two teams they should have, and St. John's beat Stony Brook. But it's going to be a great game. St. John's is playing at three home arenas this year. They've got a bunch of games at Carnesecca, Madison Square Garden, and then UBS Arena, which is the home of the New York Islanders. So it's just a little odd there. If Michigan does win, it counts as a away win, no matter where they play. So it's going to be a good one there. I know we talked about it last time, but it's worth talking about because it's a really good one tomorrow, and that's why we're doing it today because you're going to be going. So next, Joe, we're going to talk about the Maryland Terrapins. They do go 0-2 in the Asheville Championship. They lose by 3 to Davidson. Young and Reese combined for 34 of their 61 points, and then they lose today to UAB also by 3. It just seems like they can't get all of their big three to show up at the same time. And they're 1-2 right now, and their next game is at Villanova. So I'm starting to think that this Maryland team is just not that good, and I know it's early, but their team is not very deep. And when you say that in November, that's not a good sign. I'm a little bit worried for the Terrapins.
Yeah, Sean, I think last week if we had a most disappointing team, it would have been hands down Michigan State. Maybe one or two people would mention Rutgers. This week, my most disappointing team, or this episode, is Maryland. Two of those losses are really bad. Maybe the Davidson one won't come back to bite them, I'm pretty sure. But UAB on a neutral is not going to look good in March. Certainly could redeem both those losses by winning at Villanova, but based on what I've seen and the limited offense and the limited options they have, I'd be that was even remotely competitive. Come down like 5 minutes. Kevin Willard certainly had success against Villanova, but this team has not shown me the ability to go into Philly and beat Villanova. So I think they have to answer a lot of questions. Luckily, they're figuring this out pretty early on. I'm sure Willard's had teams like that at Seton Hall where they've had these questions. So, not just trying to kill a mosquito here. Sorry to our viewers. Got it. I do think there's not really much to add, Sean. We did think that would be their biggest weakness this year. I just didn't think it would come back to bite them this early and this much. I think all three of those guys are still really good, but they do need some help. And we've seen this theme over and over, particularly with Wisconsin last year where, no help off the bench is going to come back to bite you. So,
yeah, it's just like Willard's Maryland team was amazing early in the year last year. And there was no reason for it to be with them being a new team and him being a new conference. But, I'm disappointed in them. I think, I'm not entirely sure that they're going to figure it out like I would have thought that a couple days ago. But next, Joe, we had two Big Ten teams hosting SEC ranked teams on Friday. The SEC teams picked up 2 road wins. We'll start with Texas A&M and Ohio State. The Aggies beat the Buckeyes 73-66. Bruce Thornton has 24 points for the Buckeyes in the loss. Zed Key doesn't play a ton of minutes for Ohio State, but the defense is just not there for the Buckeyes.
yeah, sorry, I said that. Someone scared me. I got scared for a second. No, Ohio State, I don't think it was that bad a game for them, to be honest with you. I think they kept it close most of the game. I did not expect them to win this game. And luckily, Sean, with a game like this, they learn without much of a consequence. So I do think defensively that this could be a game you point out. They have plenty of opportunities, though, to pick up some quad one wins in non-conference. So failed their first quiz, but by no means does that mean they're not going to get one of these. And I frankly expect them to get one or two. So
Yeah, it's just a little disappointing for me. I know Texas A&M are really good, and they've got some of the fastest guards in the country, but there's an opportunity for Ohio State to show that they're better than last year, and they didn't. So I think it's a little bit of a disappointing spot there for the Buckeyes. The next one, Joe, Tennessee beats Wisconsin 80-70 at the Kohl Center. Tennessee, as we've known already, they beat Michigan State at the Breslin Center in a secret or not so secret scrimmage. It's quite the opposite for the Badgers. The offense just isn't quite there, but AJ Storr is really legit and brings their good amount of players from 5 to 6. They just need a bench, just like Maryland.
yeah, another game where the home team. I think it's kind of disappointing for the conference that through the first week of the year, no one's really had a really good win. I mean, Sean, what is the best one in the Big Ten so far? I can't name one off the top of my head, like a real game.
I don't know if there's been a power
Yeah,
opponent.
yeah, because like traditionally you'd have like Indiana, even like one of the years, the last Tom Crean year, they did beat Kansas to open the year, and you can point at that, like they'd be pretty obvious. But I'm sure this week one of these teams is going to have one. I mean, God forbid you have all these marquee matchups that we'll preview, and no Big Ten team wins. But another one of these for Wisconsin where it's going to be a learning curve. Clearly, I think their floor is very high this year. But that might also entail a limited ceiling for them as well. So I just don't think they're in their groove yet. Maybe if they play this game in December or January, they would win. But I do think by come December, January at the Kohl Center, it'll still be a very difficult task to adjust to that playing style for most teams in this conference.
Yeah, it's just, again, like Wisconsin could have shown that they're a little better than last year, and they didn't really take that opportunity. I think the best win so far in the Big Ten, Joe, is Northwestern's win over Dayton by 5. Dayton's supposed to win the A-10, but, I mean, yikes. We have a Florida Gulf Coast team that Indiana barely beat, who was in the low 100s in Ken Pom, and then Michigan's win over UNC Asheville, also in the low 100s. So that is basically the highest team that there's been one top 100 win in the Big Ten so far, and that is there will be some more this week because the Big Ten can't lose all of them, hopefully. But these teams that for Ohio State and Wisconsin, I think we think can make the tournament, but definitely are not definites, and then they don't take a big opportunity towards that goal. So we previewed the Monday Gavitt games already. Tuesday, we've got that Champions Classic game with Michigan State that we talked about. We have Wisconsin visiting a Providence team on Tuesday. Providence hasn't looked great this year. Good opportunity for Wisconsin to win that. We've got Marquette going to Illinois. I believe that's a big-time game for Illinois. Marquette, one of the best teams in the country, and Illinois has taken care of their directional schools that they've played so far. And then we've got Iowa and Creighton on Tuesday. Iowa visiting one of the best teams in the Big East. So some great matchups there, Joe. If you want to add anything, go ahead. But they're good. They're going to be great games.
I think I would say Illinois. I'd give them a significant chance of beating Marquette. That's probably. I think you might think the same, Sean. I'll put the same question on you in a second. But the reason I like Illinois in this game is this is a team that's pretty fired up. I also do not think Marquette this early in the year is good. The fact Michigan beat them pretty handily in a scrimmage, and I say handily now because I have new information. Apparently, Michigan only trailed twice, not by a large margin in that scrimmage. So Marquette just might not be in early season form yet. I mean, might not be in mid-season form yet because it is early in the season. So I think Iowa's going to have a very hard time at Creighton. I think that's an offense they're going to have a lot of trouble containing. That's going to be I think Fran McCaffrey's face will turn as red as Sean's IU pullover he has on right now. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Iowa's going to have to guard to have any chance in that game, and that's not something that really you can expect them to do. Wednesday, Joe, we've only got one. Georgetown visiting Rutgers. Georgetown just lost to Holy Cross yesterday, so it's a good chance for Rutgers to beat a power conference opponent, but it's getting to that point where, Rutgers 9-10 point favorites on Bart Torvik. Rutgers has to win this game.
Yeah, no question about it. Georgetown's not reeling, but they're certainly not a good team. I certainly do think Ed Cooley will make them better overall. But uh, this could be a game, Sean, that hurts Rutgers come March. I know it's kind of crazy to talk about it now, but that's how we have to talk about these non-conference matchups because it's not like football where it's like a loss is very clearly bad. There's no clear bad loss unless you're losing to a quad three, quad four loss. So, this could be one that could be a quad three loss if Georgetown really struggles this year, which I'm led to believe they might because the Big East is really good. I do not think Georgetown will have a good record. That's not to say they won't improve.
They'll be better than last year, but they're not going to come close to 500, I don't think.
No. So with that said, Sean, this is a game Rutgers, no question, has to win. I do think that's probably the most must-win game in terms of all these like Gavitt and Champions Classic games we have early on this week. That's must-win because every other game a team could afford to lose. Like Michigan could lose to St. John's, and Michigan State could certainly lose to Duke, and even Illinois and Iowa. They could get blown up by 50. No one will care in March.
Yeah, so Friday, Joe, the last two Gavitt games, we got Butler going to Michigan State. Butler's not that good. Michigan State should take care of business there, whether they're 1-2 or 2-1. You would think if they do beat Duke, they should be able to beat Butler. And if they don't beat Duke, then they're certainly going to crush Butler because Tom Izzo's team will not be 1-3. I'd be surprised if that game is close. Butler has a couple of good players, but they still haven't really, they're coming from a place not as bad as Georgetown, but that is nowhere near the NCAA tournament. And then the last game on Friday, as we said, Joe, Maryland visits Villanova, who have looked very impressive so far. Teams have hung around early, but Villanova has really just punked some teams in the second half that aren't great, but still, I think Villanova, this isn't a Big East show, but Villanova's going to be back to where they were, if you're not real familiar with that. So, Joe, just over 30 minutes. Good timing today. I think that's all we have for you today. Questions next time. And enjoy the basketball this week. And then we'll see you probably on Wednesday for the